Welcome to anglos.co.il. Today in the studio we have Jay Hait from Hait Family Law, and we're going to be speaking about divorce in Israel. Jay, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming in and giving your time. We really appreciate it. Maybe to start off with, maybe you can give us a little bit of background, your legal background. Who is Jay Hait?
Okay. I've been an attorney since 1997 in the United States. I've been living this go-around in Israel since 2003 and practicing law here since 2009. My practice focuses solely on family law, and all of the attorneys who work for me also, all we do is family law in our office.
Got you, thank you. So maybe to start off with, not a great topic to speak about, but it does happen. Can you tell us just, as an overview, for couples that are getting divorced, what should they be looking at, for couples that are getting divorced?
Okay, so for Jewish couples that are getting divorced, there are 4 issues that every Jewish couple with children has to resolve. Okay? First of all is custody and visitation. Second of all is child support. Third of all is the division of assets and debts. Okay. And then finally is the issue of the gitin, or the get, or the legal dissolution of the marriage. And couples that are either mixed couples or not recognized as Jewish or from other religions, you still have to address the first 3 issues, but they may not have to address the final issue.
Okay. And so now we have a couple who are at a point where they've decided to get a divorce. How would they go about starting those proceedings?
Okay, so first of all, I encourage everybody, if they can reach an agreement, they should reach an agreement. As a matter of fact, on my website, one of the free guides that I give is 6 steps to reaching an agreement. Okay? But arguendo, let's say, okay, they've reached an agreement. What they first have to do is have it formalized. Okay? Theoretically, they could do it themselves. I recommend that either they go to a lawyer or a mediator, yes, or even the social workers are able to do it.
Okay.
If they're able to reach an agreement, then what they do is they take this agreement after it's been executed, and they can go one of 2 ways. We'll look at both of them. The first way is they could go to the family court, which is what I prefer to do,
okay,
and ask the family court to affirm it as a judgment. Okay. After they've had it affirmed as a judgment in the family court, then they take the same judgment together with the agreement and bring it to the Rabbinic court, okay, and ask the Rabbinic court to confirm the judgment from the family court. Once the Rabbinic court has done that, they give an order of chiyuv get, obligated to get divorced,
right,
and then you ask them to do the gitin, the get process. Okay? And that's it. Once they have the get, they're divorced. Now, alternatively, the second way they could do it is they wouldn't go to the family court. They would go right to the Rabbinic court, right, and ask the Rabbinic court to affirm the agreement. And if the Rabbinic court, or when the Rabbinic court affirms it, then they would give a chiyuv get order, and then they could do the get the same way. Now, why do I prefer the family court?
Okay.
For a number of reasons. One of them being that in the Rabbinic court, a lot of times, if you go directly to them, yes, they will try to convince people to stay together.
Okay.
Oh, you've been married for 15 years, you have so many children, why don't you try to work it out? And theoretically, even if someone says, they can say, we're not affirming it,
yes,
go back home and try Shalom by it,
okay, so
or something like that.
Push it off.
And I just don't like the concept. It's, in my worldview,
yes,
if 2 people have reached an educated decision,
yes,
and it's educated if they've already gone through making the agreement,
right,
then the job is to make sure that the terms of the agreement are either in compliance with law and or fair, but not if there should be an agreement at all.
Yes.
And that's my first problem with going directly to the Rabbinic court. The second problem that I have is that there's an issue of continuing jurisdiction.
Okay.
In other words, let's say they reach an agreement, they get divorced, but 2 years down the line, there's lawsuits.
Yes.
So it's complex to decide where it should be, but if you've done it in the family court and you've stated specifically in the agreement that in the event of any future litigation, it will continue to be done in the family court, okay?
Yes.
Then you're in the family court, and in my opinion, the family court is generally better in terms of the following two things. When it's financial issues, I find they're quicker to appoint either an accountant or an actuary to, professionals to do it.
Okay.
And on the children-related side, I find that they're better in terms of getting psychologists to make evaluations than the rabbinic court is. And for me, I know that I want my clients to have professionals making decisions, not non-professionals.
That's a great piece of insight and advice. Maybe slightly different question is, let's say you didn't come to this decision together. What do you do if your spouse approaches you and they tell you out of the blue, I want to get a divorce? Is that somewhat different?
It's very different. I mean, first of all, I'm a big believer in marital counseling.
Yes.
Okay. As a matter of fact, when people come to us, if they haven't gone through at least a couple of sessions of counseling, we don't want to represent them.
Okay, great.
And in that situation, of course, it depends. Have they been through counseling, or is it just after a fight and someone raises the D word, the divorce word? The bottom line is that if they can't reach an agreement, then the process would be as follows. One person would file a motion to settle differences.
Okay.
Once they've filed this motion, and
only one party files that motion.
Yeah,
okay.
If they don't reach an agreement. If they reach an agreement, then they go and make the motion together to have it affirmed.
Right.
But if one party wants to and the other doesn't, or if they both want to but one party wants to make sure they get to choose which courts are going to be used, they go and they file this motion to settle differences.
Okay.
It can be filed either in the rabbinic court or the family court.
Okay.
The important thing is that once it's filed, it puts a 60-day freeze that nobody's able to file lawsuits.
Okay.
Right? They can make motions. Do you know the difference between
maybe you
a
can
motion and a
explain.
lawsuit? A motion is basically something saying, I need temporary relief. Okay. I need to use the car.
Right.
I need to have at least a little better amount of money. It's not the final lawsuit that's going to be down the line.
Okay.
So they can still do certain motions.
Yes.
Okay. But they can't file lawsuits during this time.
Okay.
Okay. And during this 60 days, the important part is they get invited to the social workers, either affiliated with the rabbinic court or with the family court. First, for a meeting without their attorneys. Mm-hmm. And the social workers really try to help them and see if they can reach an agreement. Yes. Or sometimes if they can send them to counseling. Okay. Or if they say, they'll never reach an agreement, let them just go back to court. Yes. And by the way, if they decide that, then they can stop the 60-day freeze period. They can say it's over now. Yes. Alternatively, what usually happens is the social workers try to make another couple of meetings. Yes. At those meetings, the attorneys can attend, and we try to help the couple to reach an agreement. Gotcha. So also this can be extended. I'm a big believer in using the tool to extend things. In other words, I always tell people, listen, we have to look at long-term things and short-term things. Even before, when people start working with me, what I try to do is I tell them, let's try to look at what your long-term objectives are. Okay. In other words, how do you envision things? I use a concept, tmuna metivit, the best case picture. Okay. I was telling them, first have the picture of what you want, and then let's try to see if we can build it, because a lot of it might be in jive exactly with what your spouse wants. Yes. Parts won't be. But then we can focus on fighting about the parts that aren't, not the parts that are. In any case, after this period is either extended or and has ended, or not extended and has ended, then whoever filed the motion to settle differences can file their lawsuits in whichever court they find is best for them for that particular issue. Okay. And the other side isn't able to bring suits for a period of 2 weeks. Okay. After 2 weeks, if one side the side that filed the motion to settle differences hasn't brought the suit, then the other side can bring suits.
Got you. So you've given us a great explanation. So how long in general will divorce proceedings take here? From the time you make the decision until you finally get, the get and everything is final. How long does that kind of process take?
So, and this is always, the magic mystery tour. Because, for example, if people reach an agreement, I've had it from A to Z, from the time the agreement's been signed, been over within 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
Okay? In an emergent situation where somebody was leaving the country, we were able to do everything in 8 days.
Oh, wow.
Okay? That's not the general case.
Yeah.
But it's usually a few months. If there's litigation, then, you're looking at an opening salvo of 6 months.
Okay.
And, it can go on for years.
Oh, okay, so it can take time.
Depending on what they're finding out. Now, the people might get married before the end of the litigation. They might, get divorced, They might, at a certain point in the middle of it, agree to give and to receive the get.
Okay.
And still fight about the other things.
Okay.
But generally...
So you can get a get, but
continue litigating.
Continue with the litigation.
Correct.
Okay, I understand.
Okay.
Great. Can you just explain, so now a couple's decided to become divorced, to get divorced, what assets are then divided in that process?
Okay, so the general rule is that any assets that were accumulated and debts that were accumulated during the course of the marriage get split at the end of the marriage. Okay?
Like 50-50?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay? That includes pension rights, that includes, if I bought things on my name during the course of the marriage and they came from joint assets, then that will be split.
Okay.
Also, etc. There are exceptions, okay? But the really important thing is that we look at 2 concepts, commingling and intent. Okay, commingling is if I have an inheritance,
yes.
Okay, and I put it into a joint account,
okay,
then I've commingled it. It's joint.
Yes.
So even though it's my inheritance, and even though the general exception is that inheritances don't get split,
okay,
it'll get split.
Okay, because you've put it into that joint account.
Because you've put it, right. And then the second thing we look at is intent. What was the intent that somebody had? And I'll give you a great case, in my opinion, that was recently handed down. And that was that the father of the wife gave them land in the moshav to build on.
Okay.
Okay. And the couple went and built.
Yes.
And then after, 7 or 8 years, they decided to get divorced.
Right.
The husband said, hey, I'm supposed to have half of the house.
Yes.
And the wife said, no, you're not. It's my father gave it to us.
Yes.
And the court said, look, the husband, who in that case was an engineer, was every single day while the house was being built there taking care of things, saying, no, do that, do this. Mm-hmm. And no one told him, hey, it's not yours.
Yes.
Don't do it. And they said, so it was clear to the judge that the intent was that it was his, otherwise he wouldn't have been there.
Right.
And the judge said, however, I will say that it was never the intent, or I haven't seen any intent, that the land became the husband's, just the house.
Okay.
And therefore he gave him only a quarter of it rather than a half.
Okay, gotcha.
And that's why I say I thought it was really interesting to see the judge's process of differentiating. I'm not sure that it was right. I'm not sure that I agree.
Right.
But I thought it was great that he did the analysis.
He applied his mind to the actual
Exactly.
specific case. That's great. Is there, here in Israel, is there such a concept as alimony? And can you just explain?
Okay, so after the get is given, generally the rule is that there is not alimony.
Okay.
Marriage is looked at through the halachic concept as really a property and relationship arrangement.
Yes.
And once the relationship is over, there aren't further obligations.
Got you.
That being said, there is a possibility to get alimony while you're still married.
Okay.
Okay. In other words, if, for example, the husband is the primary breadwinner, and all of a sudden says, "I'm not, giving any more money," well, the ketuvah, which I told you is a contract, obligates him to do certain things.
Yes.
So the wife can sue for alimony while they're still married.
Okay.
And she will get, he'll have to continue her current lifestyle of, even things like pedicures, having her hair done.
Yes. If she's accustomed to that lifestyle.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And then the other type of alimony is rehabilitative alimony.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I think we talked offline about how I think that the system is very unfair to both sides.
Yes.
One of the unfair things is that you can have a couple, and the couple decide that, hey, the husband makes a lot more money, and because they have X number of children, if the wife were to go to work, it would cost more for her to go to work than to stay home and because they have to pay for care for the children, than for her to stay home with the kids. So she stays home. 25 years later, they decide to get divorced, or he says he wants to get divorced. Now, she hasn't developed her career.
Yes.
She's been home, she brought up the kids, etc. And she only gets half of their assets, but now he's, you know, working at a job where he's making, you know, 700,000 shekels a year, but there's no alimony. So, which, as I said, I believe to be unfair.
Okay.
At the very least, what she can do is she can ask for rehabilitative alimony, and they will give her an amount, not a large amount, but an amount for a defined period, usually a short period of up to 2 or 3 years, where he'll have to give her something so that she can either retrain, reaccustom, go start working, etc.
And when you say they give her, who prescribes that?
The family court judge, or the rabbinic court judges, which are called dayanim.
Okay. So maybe this is a good time to if you can maybe just explain for those who don't know, just explain the get. What is a get, and how does it work? Okay.
Well, first of all, the get is really the legal divorce. You know, yes, it's a document.
Yes.
Okay. What happens when we have the get is there's what's called the get ceremony, and in the get ceremony, what happens is the sides are present. The first thing that they do is a verification of who the parties are. That's why, if you've ever heard that you have to bring witnesses for the get.
Yes.
Okay, they're witnesses since it's all going according to Talmudic law, right, which was written in the Middle Ages. So basically, what they do is they want to verify who the sides are, and the way it's done is by verifying, do you know the father of the witness? Does the witness know the father of the party that they're being witnessed for?
Okay.
Okay. After we've verified the names, then the first part of the ceremony happens. In that part of the ceremony, the husband appoints a sofer, a scribe, to write the get for him.
Okay.
The scribe goes and writes the get, and then the second part of the ceremony occurs, whereby the husband gives the get to the wife. She accepts it. You know, and this is really, it's very ceremonious. She takes it, she puts it under her arm, she walks 3 steps away.
Okay.
And at that point, they are divorced. The rabbis, the dayanim, tell her, you know, you shouldn't get pregnant in the next 90 days, etc.
Yes.
And that's it. Then they're divorced halachically,
So
and they can go.
Intents and purposes.
Well, right, and then they can go and they get the certificate of divorce, the Tudat Gerushin.
Okay.
And since a lot of your viewers are Anglos, I want to point out that a lot of people call my office and they say, hey, how do we get divorced in America after we're divorced here, or in England after we're divorced here? And generally what they can do is take the divorce certificate and have it notary translated, and then get it apostilled. And that is accepted at least in the US and in the UK, from my experience, as a divorce certificate from any other state or country, and they're able to use it. They don't have to do a separate process to get divorced in their home countries.
So they would then be legally recognized
as divorced.
Even that they did it in Israel, they'd be legally divorced for purposes in other countries for an Anglo living here.
Correct. I've also done it with Germany and with France, of course, with the translations into those languages. But the point is that, generally people think, oh, we have to do another divorce. Generally, you don't. I'm not saying, of course, I'm sure there are some countries that may require it, but I haven't encountered them yet.
So this may be a complicated question, because I know, when we spoke before about in marriage in a previous interview. We know that certain people aren't able to get married legally in Israel, and they would go overseas to get married, and that they would then come back, and that would be if those people then wanted to get divorced, would they have to go overseas to get divorced? Would they be able to get a divorce in Israel? How would that work?
Okay, so we have to look at two different categories, okay? The first category is the people who are Jewish who have gone outside of Israel and gotten married and then come back to Israel.
Okay.
And those people will have to get divorced, and they'll usually have a get l'chumra, a get just to be sure in any case. You know, the point is, a lot of people think that, hey, we'll go to Cyprus and then we won't have to do anything with the Rabbinut.
Yes.
Then when they come to get divorced, it turns out that in any case you still have to go to the Rabbinut. That's number one. But for people who are they just can't legally get married in Israel, then those people get divorced in the family court.
Yes.
And, you know, it's basically like an annulment. But they go through the family court, and, you know, everything's the same, except at the end of the process, we get a letter from the Rabbinic court and or any other court, you know, a Catholic court if it's a Catholic person, or an affidavit if it's someone who says that they don't have a religion.
Yes.
Okay? And then the family court will end the marriage.
Okay, so that will be that the marriage won't end with the get and the get ceremony.
They don't have that part.
They don't have that part. They would just do it through the family court.
Correct.
Okay, great. You touched on a little bit before. You spoke a little bit about inheritance. Mm-hmm. What happens with inheritance generally in divorce?
Well, if you've kept it in your own name and haven't commingled it, then it remains yours.
Okay, so it's not thrown into the pot or anything.
Right, and one of the things I always tell people to be careful of, first of all, is if you have specific intent, make an agreement. Even you know, even though you're already married, even if you have a prenup, you can make a different monetary agreement that says just, hey, we both agree that no matter what happens, this inheritance is going to stay separate, even if the intent looks different. So let me give you the example with the problematic area. Okay. So H and W, that's my husband and wife in this scenario, are married, and W gets an inheritance.
Right.
And W says to H, you know, we really should fix up our house.
Yes.
And now I have these 300,000 shekels that I inherited.
Right.
Let's fix up the house. And she takes the money and they fix up the house. Well, now that inheritance amount, even though that was hers, is commingled. It's together.
Right. And it's been spent.
And it's, well, that's what I mean.
Yes.
So she can't say when they get divorced, oh, wait a second, we used my inheritance money, so I want to get a credit for it. Right. She can say that, and morally she may be right.
Yes.
And in a mediation, she may get it.
Yes.
But legally, if that's what goes to the court, she probably won't.
Let's talk about something that's maybe a little bit unpleasant. You spoke about, you told me before about dealing with divorce with people in other countries and things like that. Let's say, for example, your spouse leaves the country. Mm-hmm. Somebody's spouse just leaves the country. What is the process then? Can you still get a divorce from that person?
Yes, you can file for divorce here. First of all, you still have to do you open a motion to settle differences, the bakasha liyashev sichsuchim, and you say immediately, we're asking you to close it right away because the other side isn't even here.
Yes.
They'll usually allow that, and then you bring your lawsuit and have them served in the other country.
Okay.
The issue is a jurisdictional issue.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you an example. In a lot of countries, there's spousal support, alimony.
Yes.
Right? So it might be advantageous for someone to get divorced in the other country because here they won't get spousal support.
Yes.
There they will.
Gotcha.
Okay, so then what we have to look at, or what I as an attorney do, is look at jurisdictional issues. First of all, when they go to that area, are they able to bring a divorce right away? Mm-hmm. Usually not. Usually you have to be living there for a certain amount of time. If they've been living there for that certain amount of time, well, if I'm the spouse outside of that country, can I bring the divorce there? And if so, am I able to get alimony there? Because then maybe it's worth my while to bring the divorce there, even if it's more expensive, etc. I mean, these are things that we sit down and plan.
Interesting.
But the point is that absolutely you can get divorced even if the person leaves. It's just a question of, looking at the chessboard and seeing which is the most advantageous way of doing it for the client.
Obviously, that would have an impact if they've just up and left and run away. it would then have an impact on the process of that whole process of
that.
The
absolutely, there are people who do that for exactly that reason.
Right.
I cannot tell you, unfortunately, because of the way the system works here.
Yes.
How many people I know or have called me from overseas who have run away from Israel at the expense of not seeing their children, etc.,
Yes.
because of A, the get issues, and B, stop order issues.
Right.
So,
is it different now if somebody runs away or leaves the country? That's one thing. Let's just say, for example, because we're olim and people do come and go, and we do have family, and some people live abroad. Slightly different subject. Is it possible to get it? Let's say one spouse doesn't flee the country, but one spouse now lives in the US and one spouse lives in Israel. The same process applies to getting the divorce?
right, although if they agree, they can do the agreement and then have a baked in the area where the other person lives, give the get or deliver the get and have it done that way.
Okay, gotcha. Let's say your spouse comes to you out of the blue, and they tell you that they want to get a divorce. You don't want to get a divorce. Is there a way to force your spouse to stay married?
Okay, so there's a concept called a suit for Shalom Bayit, for reconciliation.
Okay.
So first, I always tell people, listen, first of all, there's an interesting statistic that I found in Israel that 10% of the couples that divorce
Yes.
end up together afterwards.
Oh, really?
I found that mind-boggling. But I always tell people, look, a lot of times people start towards divorce, and then in the end, they reconcile. Okay? And I always say that people who sue for Shalom Bayit are always going to get divorced.
Yes.
People who sue for divorce sometimes reach Shalom Bayit.
Right.
Okay? And the reason is that it's, and I may be jaded at this point in time,
Okay.
but it's used as a tool. In other words, if I sue for Shalom Bayit and they're not letting us get divorced,
Yes.
first of all, there are other things I can sue for, like the right not to have our house sold.
Yes.
Okay? Because we're living in it,
Gotcha.
etc. Eventually you're going to get divorced, or someone will be an agun, but definitely, people have used it as a tool many times.
Okay. And you touched on this briefly. Let's say you've decided to get a divorce, and now, like you say, 10% of people get back together, but during the divorce proceedings you decide, listen, we want to try and work this out. Can you stop divorce proceedings once they've started?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I want to say even more than that, what I recommend to people to do is to enter into, if they stop them, what's called a Shalom Bayit Lechilufin Girushin agreement,
Okay.
which is a reconciliation and in the alternate divorce agreement.
Okay.
And let me explain
Yeah,
why I believe that.
Okay.
The biggest problem when people start divorce is they're getting into, I don't know how old you are, but you ever hear the Magic Mystery Tour? The Magic Mystery Tour.
I haven't, but I am old.
So there's a song about the Magic Mystery Tour that I remember from this, and people who start divorce, they're getting on the Magic Mystery Tour.
Right.
They don't know, how are things going to be divided?
Yes.
What's going to be with my children? What is our relationship going to be? A zillion questions.
Yes.
And I always say, look, you guys decided that you want to give it a last shot, then let's do it in the manner that, first of all, we're going to codify exactly what you're going to do in your last shot.
Yes.
Are you just saying, forget it? No, most people aren't. Someone's taken on certain things. I'll try to do this, I'll try to do that. We'll go to counseling together, etc.
Yes.
And I say codify it, put it into the agreement, and more importantly, put what's going to happen if it doesn't work into the agreement, so that no one gets back on the Magic Mystery Tour.
Yes.
Okay. And by the way, I will say that I've been told by people that it's really helped them to stay together. And I said, what do I mean? They've told me, listen, I've wanted, after we had the Shalom Bayit Lechilufin Girushin agreement, and I was ready to leave, and then I looked and I said, do I really want to only see my kids 2 days a week in alternate weekends?
Yes.
No, stay and see if things get better.
Right.
Or, for women who have said, I've looked and I said, can I live on the 4,000 shekels I'm going to get with 4 kids?
Yes.
No. Okay, so I'm a strong believer in that as a tool. But even if you don't use that tool, you can definitely at any time stop the divorce proceedings.
That's great advice. Let's say, for example, somebody decides that they want to get divorced and one spouse is pregnant. Do you have to tell your husband that you're pregnant at the time of divorce?
So I would say as follows. I can't think of any law that says, well, you have to tell them. I can tell you that I think that there's something called choser tom lev, a lack of clean hands is what we have. And I think that any court that would be ruling on future issues, including child support, maybe division of assets, etc., would definitely look at the wife and say that there was choser tom lev, she had lack of clean hands. I would say even more, if she went and aborted it, there would be less of a problem than her being pregnant, planning on having the kid, and not telling the spouse.
Got you. You're in the proceedings. Is there certain things you can do, or is there a way to manage finances during this time? Something that you would advise?
There are many ways. One of the first things that I try to do when I represent someone is, even after I filed the motion to settle differences, I invite the other party in and I tell them, look, if I'm successful in representing this person, then it's not just that you're going to be divorced. It's that we're going to build together a new relationship.
Yes.
In other words, especially if you have kids, you're still going to be in each other's lives for a long time to come. And the question is, are we able to build your relationship so that in your children's future life events, they don't have to say, oh man, what am I going to do about Abba and Ima? But can focus on, learning their parsha for a bar mitzvah, planning their wedding, etc. And if I build the relationship properly, or if we're successful, then that's what it will be. So I invite the person in and I say, hey, let's try to build a relationship. And as part of that, one of the first things that I do is I say, look, let's agree that we're not going to take any unilateral financial steps in the interim. Let's agree on what we are going to do. Some of the time it means that both sides agree just that they're going to continue, at least for the moment, going the way that they've been living until now. Some of the times it means that we're going to change and agree that we're going to spend only X or Y. But the point is, I think that if we're able at that stage to reach an agreement about how the finances are going to be during the course of a divorce, we have a much better shot at reaching an amicable divorce that will answer or meet the other needs that I believe people need to focus on.
That's great. Maybe just to finish off with, we again touched on in a previous interview about the concept of common law marriage and things like that. For people, is there such a thing as a common law couple here in Israel? And let's say they want to split up. How would that work?
Okay, so it's first of all, it's not common law. What we have is Yeduim B'tzibur, or known in public, and that's people who have formed a joint household or are cohabiting, as they call it in the States, a cohabiting couple, not a common law marriage, but they would go through the same type of process, just in the family court, and it would only be regarding assets, child support, and custody and visitation. Okay,
so it's more around financial and child issues would be resolved through the family court.
Correct.
Great. Jay, maybe just to close off, I don't know if there's maybe something we haven't touched on, or just something that you've seen over your years of experience, if you have any other advice that you'd like to give.
Yeah, I recommend that everybody go for counseling, even if you're going to get divorced. I'm not saying, and I tell people when they come to me, you don't necessarily have to get counseling to stay married. You can get counseling for divorce, and I find that when people go through counseling, sometimes by themselves, sometimes together, it's just when the real issues are clear. In other words, what happens, you go home, you've had a lousy day, you're mad at your spouse for A, B, and C anyway, and then, they leave the shirt on the floor, and you just go nuts. How many times have I told you? Well, that's not the real issue. I find when they go for counseling, they can figure out what the real issues are, and then any agreement that they're able to reach can address the real issues and build for a more stable future, again, assuming that they have children and are going to be involved in each other's lives because of the children for a long time into the future.
It's a great piece of advice. Jay, thank you so much for giving your time and sharing your insights and experience with us and for being here today.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thanks for watching.